An Indian singer, the state of Louisiana, and Canada. This dish connects all three. We're talking about jambalaya. So we're going to make a prawn or shrimp and andouille jambalaya. And for this, I've forgotten to take a picture of all the ingredients before we started filming. So we're just going to go with it as the ingredients pop up on your screen. We're going to start by peeling some shrimp. And what we're going to do is we're going to use the shells of the shrimp to create a stock in which the rice will be cooked. So you can see here that I'm peeling the shrimp and putting the shells into a stock pot with a lot of water in it. And that's going to be boiled down, and that's going to flavor our rice. So next we're going to prep some vegetables. For this we're going to use the holy trinity of Cajun cooking, or Creole cooking as you want to call it, which is onions, celery and peppers. So traditionally I think it's mostly green bell peppers that I use, but I'm going to use one green and one red. We'll start with the green onions. We're going to separate the whites from the greens. That's just because we use the whites in the initial cook, and the green part of the onion is just used for garnishing. We're also going to use some garlic in this, and we're going to use about 6 cloves of garlic. We're going to mince them really fine, as we usually do with garlic. It's just going to impart that much more flavor and be, well, overall give you that umami taste that we love from garlic. Next we do the onions. We're going to peel them, and you can see I'm going to put the peels into the stock. That's going to flavor the broth again for the rice and the final cook. We're going to do it in a nice medium dice, so we're looking at about 1 centimeter diced, and that's just going to make it easier to cook, and it's going to cook more evenly. Now for the bell pepper, like I said before, we're going to use one green and one red. So we're going to start by coring the bell pepper, and what I usually do is I make a small slit into the side and then just peel it round. So the core is going into the stock as we discussed before, along with the garlic peels and everything else. The rest of the pepper we're going to dice into a 1 centimeter dice, similar to what we did with the onion, and that's just to make sure that it cooks evenly. Now you can make the stock from scratch like I'm doing here, or you could just buy some shrimp stock from the store. I just like using my own stock because it helps me control the flavors that go in, and also it reduces the kitchen waste. So you'll see that most of the peels of the vegetables that we use for this dish are going to go in the stock to flavor that broth. And now we come to the last part of the vegetable prep, which is the celery. We're going to try and cut this the same size as we did with the onion and the bell peppers so that it cooks evenly. And that's again a 1 centimeter dice. So now we strain the stock. And we set that aside for the rice. For the next part, I'm going to chop up the andouille sausage. Now, if you can't find andouille, you can use other sausages. It should be a little bit spicy, so you can use like a spicy Italian or hot Italian, or you can try a chorizo, or well, even a colabasa would work. But just make sure it's got a little bit of spice in it. The advantage to using an andouille is that it already has some Cajun spicing in there, so it adds to the flavor of the overall dish. Now we start the cook. So we're going to use a nice white pan, and I like using white pans when I'm cooking rice. This is especially because when you use a tall pan for rice or a stock pot for rice, the heat doesn't get distributed evenly. So what ends up happening is that you get a burnt layer at the bottom and an uncooked layer at the top. So in order to ensure an even cook, I use a very wide braising pan, and we start by putting a little bit of oil in there, putting on a medium heat and browning the sausage. You can just use the sausage without the casing, but I like keeping the casing so it gives little chunks of sausage rather than acting like ground pork. So I like keeping it whole, and you're just going to sear the sausage on either side and then take it out of the pan. Now after we've taken out the andouille from the pan, you can see there's a lot of buildup at the bottom. This is what we call the fond in North America, and this is something that's going to add a lot of flavor to your dish. So what we do is that we keep the pan on the same heat and we add in the trinity. So that's all the vegetables we've cut up so far: the celery, the onions, the garlic, the bell pepper, and also the whites of the green onion. We keep the greens for later. So now we saute the vegetables, and we saute them on a medium-high heat. Now while we're doing the sauteing, make sure that you scrape the bottom well and make sure you get all that fond off the bottom. The vegetables will release some water, which will help in deglazing the pan as well, and overall it just makes it easier to deglaze the pan. We also have to add in the spices at this point. So I'm going to use a basic Cajun seasoning, which is a little bit of oregano, a little bit of paprika, some chili powder. In this case, I'm talking about crushed pepper, but ground fine. And I also put in a little bit of salt and pepper, just enough to get a nice flavor to the whole broth. Now keep in mind, we haven't used any salt in the stock itself. So this is the only salt we're adding to the dish. I also like to add in a few bay leaves. So in this case I'm using 2, but you can add one more if you like. And I also add in tomato paste, which makes this more Creole than Cajun. The difference usually is the use of tomatoes, because the Cajuns who were displaced from the Acadian coast were not as well off as their Creole counterparts. So they didn't use tomatoes as much. Also, they used more spices rather than herbs, so more pepper and stuff like that. But Creoles used to use more herbs, so it would be thyme and sage and some maybe rosemary if they're lucky, or oregano. So in this case we're doing kind of a mix, so it's a tribute to both the Creole as well as the Cajun backgrounds. Once the vegetables have softened sufficiently, you'll know this by the change in the aroma that comes out from the saute pan. Initially you'll get a very strong, potent aroma of onions and garlic, and as it cooks down and softens, the aroma changes to a more caramelized aroma. So when you notice that change in aroma, that's when you know it's ready to add the next item in. And the next item in this case is the rice. Our aim is to get the rice evenly distributed and well coated with the fond and the tomato paste and everything else that's in there, the spices and the herbs. We do that by just stirring it up nicely, and you can use a visual guide. So once the rice looks more or less red, you can stop stirring it in. The idea is to just heat up the rice to some extent. Once that's achieved, we can add in the stock. And in this case, we're adding in the whole 8 cups. Now we just wait for it to come to a boil while we scrape down the sides and make sure all the rice is in the liquid. Once it comes to a boil, we can cover it and leave it. Once the rice has absorbed about 70% of the liquid, we're now ready for the next step, which is to add in the shrimp. Now the shrimp is the stuff that we had deveined and cleaned in the beginning, and we had also seasoned it with a little bit of salt. That's just to make sure the shrimp gets some flavor. Now we cover again and we wait for about 4 to 5 minutes to let that cook, and then add in the sausages and stir that up, make sure it's evenly distributed, and cover. Now we're just waiting for the rice to get completely cooked. So you can do this 2 ways. You can either wait for the rice to be cooked by testing it by eating a bit, or you can just wait for all the liquid to be absorbed in. So it completely depends on whether you want like a soupy jambalaya or you want a more firm jambalaya, and that's completely up to you. My first experience with jambalaya was the song by the Carpenters originally, but I heard it sung by none other than the Indian singer Usha Utthap. My mom was a big fan and apparently heard her live in Calcutta, and she used to play the song almost every day when I was growing up. So I was obsessed with this dish, which I had never tasted but heard so much about. And as I grew up, I decided to try this dish. I researched enough to know what this dish should taste like. So we're now in the final stretch of the cook, and you can see that the rice has almost absorbed all the water. So we're going to turn the heat off and we're going to add the remaining green onion, the green part of the green onion, as a garnish on top. Now the trick is to add this while it's still hot, so it kind of imparts some flavor and gets a little bit cooked but remains crispy. Now this last part is an optional extra which I like to add in. It's my own personal touch to the dish, and I don't know if anyone does it in Louisiana, but it's the way I like to do it, and it adds a little bit of a crunch as well as flavor to the dish. So what I do is I slice up some okra really fine and I deep fry it till it gets nice and crispy, and that becomes a nice topping for the dish. If you like my videos, please don't forget to like and subscribe, and also share with your friends, anyone who wants to learn how to cook. I'm going to try and upload a video every week, if not more than that, and hopefully you'll learn something new.